lights burn bright. You're blinded now, can't see the fight. Smoke and mirrors, they lead the way. Fooling hearts night after day. Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row. Painted faces, masks of stone. A hollow laugh that chills the bone. Puppets dangle strings unseen. Life's a trick, a cruel machine. Do you see it? Do you feel it? Or just believe it? Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row. Round and round the carousel, a twisted tune you know too well.
Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to episode 7 of Breaking the System. This one is about the Miseducation of America. So, raise your hand if you guys remember learning about George Washington and the cherry tree. And then raise your hand if you learned that the Civil War was a disagreement between brothers. Also raise your hand if you thought that you were getting an education. Well, what you're actually getting was a program. So, welcome back to Breaking the System. I'm your host, and today we are ripping the cover off of the proverbial textbook. We talk a lot about the system on this show, the economy, the politics, the corruption. But one of the most dangerous systems isn't one of the banks or the ballot boxes. It's one of the classroom, honestly. Today we're talking about the hijacking of America's education. And how a system designed to create factory workers is now being used to feed future generations a history that, let's just be honest, quite possibly never happened, right? And that's where I want to leave it up to you guys out there to do a little bit of digging and do a little bit of research and do some critical thinking for yourself and come to a conclusion of whether that's true or not. So let's talk about the Prussian plague for a second. So to understand this lie, you have to understand the machine. Most people think American public schools are built on the idea of the founding fathers and the freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, that's what we're taught anyways, right? It's what we hope as American citizens. This is false. Our modern school system was actually imported in the 1840s from Prussia. That's modern-day Germany. The Prussian model wasn't designed to create free thinkers or Republicans, because remember, we are a constitutional republic. We are not a democracy. We have democracy values. We have democracy that's built into the system of the United States of America, but we are a constitutional republic. And it was designed by a monarch to create obedient soldiers and compliant workers. Okay? So let's think about it. The bells, all the desks in a nice little row, the raising of the hands for permission to speak or to even use the bathroom. The new one, as of late, is the standardized testing. Like, everything is standardized and everything is conformed to a test, right? They test you on everything. Well, this wasn't accidental. This was a hijack from day one. So Horace Mann, the father of the American public education, brought this system here not to liberate minds, but to understand them. And the goal was to create a citizenry that was smart enough to push buttons in the factory, but not smart enough to ask why they're stuck in the factory. Or, why am I pushing this button? Why am I not pushing that button over there? Like, why do I have to push the button that I'm pushing, so to speak? You know what I'm saying? Okay. And that structure, it's still being operated. It's still the operating system of American public school today. We aren't raising citizens per se. We're raising employees, right? Employees for the next job. That way they can get you working from legal age of 16. Unless you get parental consent, then you can work sooner than that. But then they want you to basically work until the day that you die, right? They're talking about raising the age of retirement to 72. You know, I mean, that's pretty scary. So let's talk about the narrative war for a second. This so-called false history. Now, if the structure is about obedience and the curriculum is about control, where does this false history come into play? Okay. Well, history in America isn't about what happened. It's about what the people in power need you to believe happened. And this is happening on both sides, right? Happens from the left, happens from the right, happens from everybody, and that is the pendulum of propaganda. Okay, coming from both sides, right? Which is why you should always question the system. You should always break the system, break free, have critical thinking, okay? Think for yourself, okay? So for decades, we were fed this Disney version of America, right? The sanitization. We learned that the founders were like gods, so to speak. They were these flawless men who carved freedom out of granite, and we skipped over the brutal realities of most slavery. And we are teaching a little bit of slavery in history, but a lot of times it's just the African American slavery. We're not taught slavery from the Chinese perspective that helped build the railroads. We're not talking about slavery from the Irish perspective that helped mine the mines and, you know, cut the trees down and things like that. We're not talking about slavery from the Native Americans. We skip a lot of that. We also skip a lot of the displacements. Talk about the Native Americans and the labor wars. We're taught a history that was designed to make us feel comfortable and not informed, right? You, as an American citizen, we want you to feel comfortable in that everything that your government has done for you And bayou is this green field full of flowers, and it's all like harmonious and it's wonderful, and that's not true. And but now the hijacking has shifted gears just a little bit. Now we see a push to rewrite history in other directions. We see curricula that wants to define America only by its sins as of late. Right? You see that on the news all the time anymore. We have students learning that 1776 matters less than 1619. We have entire historical figures being erased because they don't fit the modern political lens. We're taking statues down and replacing them with other statues, so to speak. But here's the truth that they won't tell you. History is messy, and it's gray, and it's full of heroes who did villainous things and villains who did heroic things. Okay? It really is. Sit back and think about it. Put some critical thinking into your life once in a while, right? And that's what this show is all about, is you, as a citizen, critically thinking for yourself and not being told what to think and how to think and where to think it, right? That's important to be your individual self. The system doesn't want you to understand nuances. It wants you to pick a team, so to speak, right? Red team, blue team, white team, black team. There's a team for everything, and that's how they divide us. And if they teach you the myth, you become the blind nationalist. And if they teach you the guilt, you become a demoralized activist. Neither of those people is a free thinker. Both of them are useful idiots for and by a political machine. Okay? And let's be honest. For a few years I was one of those idiots as well. And there are some days that I still feel like one. So that's why we have to think for ourselves. So let's talk about the textbook racket for a second. Who controls this textbook racket, and who pulls the levers, so to speak? Well, just like anything else, when it comes to the government, we should follow the money, right? The textbook industry in America is a monopoly controlled largely by two states, Texas and California, because they buy the most books and they dictate what goes in them. Okay? Most of you probably didn't know that. So you have publishers that are rewriting paragraphs to make a board in Texas happy, and then rewriting the same paragraph to make a board in California happy. And the result of this is a Frankenstein history, a watered-down, committee-approved, sanitized narrative that offends no one and teaches no one. Okay, or it offends the other half, right? Whatever that half is. So they have swapped education for an indoctrination, and they don't want you to know how money works. They don't at all. If they did, right, they would teach stocks and bonds and investing and how to buy a car and how to mortgage a house and all of those important things, how to write a check, right? That would be just as important as those English classes and those science classes, right? But that's not how it works. They don't want you to know how the Federal Reserve works, and they certainly don't want you to know how the actual history of government corruption came into play. And we have to ask ourselves why. Well, because an educated citizenry is the biggest threat to a corrupt system, right? They've always told us power of the people, for the people, and by the people. But if they keep us divided and they don't educate us, right? They keep us in the proverbial dark. There's an old story about the cave, so to speak. If you've never heard the story about the cave, it kind of goes something like this. That In the beginning, we were cavemen, staring at a wall full of shadows, and we were scared of the shadows, and we were told not to look behind us because the shadows told us to. And so we lived in the cave, and we lived in the darkness, and we were scared of the shadows for many, many years, until one caveman turned around and seen that there was something else in the cave. Didn't know quite what it was, but he started walking towards it, and it was the door. And in the door was the sun, and the sun was shining into the cave, and the cavemen were actually scared of their own shadows. And the light is the knowledge that we don't see if we are kept in this cave scared of our own shadows for our entire lives, right? We're told not to turn around. We're told not to question things. Okay? And that's the story of the cave. So, let me get a raise up here just for a second. So the textbooks, right? The textbooks they come from like 3 different companies. Where did that go? My thing is messed up here. There it is. So the textbooks, they have a monopoly. And so how do they enforce this standard across 50 states? Well, they make sure that every kid gets the same programming through the choice or through the illusion of choice, right? So like I said, this industry is a cartel, and they're what they call the big 3. We have Pearson, McGraw-Hill, and Houghton, Mifflin, Harcourt. Okay. But there is a darker reality. Who owns them? These aren't just publishing houses with dusty libraries. These companies are actually owned and traded by massive equity firms. So we're talking about firms like Veritas Capital and Platinum Equity. And the bad thing about these firms is that they are profit-driven investment vehicles, okay? And they don't care about things like the Constitution. They certainly don't care about things like historical accuracy. So what do they care about? Well, they care about ESG scores, environmental, social, and governance scores. And this is to keep the investment money flowing from places like BlackRock and Vanguard. And if you've not heard of BlackRock and Vanguard, do a little research on the market, on the S&P. Almost every company that is traded globally that's in the U.S. stock market, number 1 and number 2 investors of every single company across the board is BlackRock and Vanguard. Okay? And these equity firms, they follow the same rules as basically everybody else does. So these textbook companies must push woke agendas, right? If that's what BlackRock and Vanguard want, and that is what they want. They were actually talking about this about 15 years before it actually came into the textbook that your kids were reading. So they have to sanitize history and inject modern leftist ideology into the books to maintain their corporate social credit score, right? Or else they get dinged on those things, okay? So they have captured the market. They produce the books. They produce the standardized tests that measure if you read the textbooks, how you read the textbooks. They produce the digital software now that tracks your child's behavior, which makes it a closed loop system of control, okay, within public education. And so that creates a war on reality, right? This closed loop that is pushing right now. And that kind of brings us to the most dangerous aspect of the modern hijack, the destruction of objective truth. And we're not just fighting over whether 1776 was a good year anymore. We're fighting over basic biology, right? Look at the curriculum in states across this country. And what you will see, if you haven't noticed yet, is an injection of gender ideology and this transgenderism starting as low as elementary school. And as parents, we have to ask ourselves, why? Why are we confusing 6-year-olds about their gender? Why are we even having this conversation with 6-year-olds? That's the question that I'm asking. Why are we giving them books that talk about this stuff? And not only does it talk about it, but it gives them illustrated pictures showing these acts of sexual deviancy, and it really brings things into a child's mind, into their eyes, that they probably shouldn't be seeing until much, much later. And so this is not about inclusion. This is about destabilization. Because if you can get a child to mistrust their own eyes, you can get them to mistrust their own biology. And you have, in essence, broken their connection to reality. And more importantly, you sever the bond between the child and the parent. Okay? And this is also something that's extremely important. Something that's been going on for a few years now. That when a school tells a child, your parents don't understand you, but we do. We will keep your secrets safe. We will affirm your new identity, right? That becomes a hostile takeover of the family unit, of the nuclear family, right? And that's what they want. So they're replacing history with narcissism. They're teaching children to obsess over their identity, over their pronouns, over their oppression status, rather than teaching them about things like the Roman Empire and the Bill of Rights and critical thinking. And we're not teaching all sides of the aspect on all of these topics. We're only teaching them from one side, from their side, to make them look good and to make you and I look bad. Okay? Do a little bit of research. You see that a lot of parents have been demonized as of late. They go to board meetings, school board meetings. They go to council board meetings, and they get kicked out, right? And that's bad. Like, why are parents getting kicked out for being advocates of their children, right? That's your child. That's my child. That's not the school's child. And there are some states that have went so far as to say that the state will say, well, those are our children. Like hell they are, right? So you as a parent, you've got to start showing up, right? You've got to walk through the door. You've got to be present. So A confused generation is an easily controlled generation, a generation that cannot define what a man or a woman is, cannot define things like what tyranny is or what liberty is, right? A child that can't define what a man or a woman is, they're not going to be able to critically think for themselves. Okay? And if we go back to following the money, look at the Rockefeller Foundation. They really laid the cement for those private equity firms that bought the printing presses and now the ideologies that are writing the script, right? They were the Rockefellers were the initial investors in a lot of this. So is that good or is that bad? And that kind of goes back to 1902, and that was the year the General Education Board was founded. But who founded it? And like we said, well, that was founded by J.D. Rockefeller. And so so J.D. he was into oil, right? So why would an oil tycoon dump hundreds of millions of dollars into public education? It's it was out of the kindness of his heart, wasn't it? That's what it was. No, it was an investment. Okay. So Frederick T. Gates, the business advisor to Rockefeller and a key architect on this board, wrote a mission statement that I think every parent needs to hear. And so when I pulled this up, this is supposed to be his direct quotes. So this is it. In our dreams, people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or science. We have not to raise up from among them authors, editors, poets, or men of letters. Okay? So think about that. Look that up. Read it again. So what it's saying is they didn't want philosophers. And they don't want authors. They wanted docility. They wanted workers who could read just enough that they could read instructions, but not enough to question authority. Okay? So they hijacked the system at the foundation to ensure the American populace would serve the corporate elites. Okay? And that was at the beginning. You could also look at it as an economic hijack, right? And now we're kind of living through a psychological hijack, so to speak, right? By those 3 textbook companies, right? They've basically hijacked our kids' minds into basically forcing them to read and think and live in this hellish nightmare of what we call a public education system. Okay? So what can we do? Well, like we said, as parents, we need to find out about this stuff. This so-called false history. These gender secrets that the boards and some of these teachers and some of these administrators are keeping secret, so to speak. And we need to speak up. We need to start showing up to board meetings like a lot of parents did in 2020 and 2021. Okay? We need to start looking at these so-called pornographic books that are found in the libraries. And we need to read them. Read them out loud. and start demanding answers as to why. Why are these books in our libraries? Why is our kids having access to this stuff at such a young age? Okay, take those books to the school board meeting. Read it right there in front of everybody. Okay, get up on the podium, stand up. You were the parent. And so when they did this in 2020 and 2021, how did the system respond? Did they apologize? Yeah. Did they debate? No. They weaponized the government. And on September 29th, 2021, the NSBA, the National School Boards Association, sent a letter to our former president, President Biden. And in this letter, they compared American parents, you, the moms, and you, the dads, that were concerned about your kids. You were compared to domestic terrorists. Very interesting, right? They asked the federal government to use the Patriot Act. And if you don't know what the Patriot Act is, you need to look into that as well. Legalization designed to hunt Al-Qaeda. And they used this against parents who were yelling at school board meetings, which you have every right to do. That is your First Amendment. And if they don't let you speak your First Amendment at those board meetings, sue them. Take them to court. You are the parent. You are the voice of your child. Okay? Well, just a few days later, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, issued a memo directing the FBI to look into these threats, into these domestic parent terrorists. Let that sink in. To look into you. You are a threat to the system because you are speaking up, for those of you that did. And God bless you and thank you for doing that, okay? The system is so terrified of losing control over the narrative that they're willing to treat tax-paying parents like insurgents. And they believed, like we said a while ago, that your child belonged to them. And that is the crux of the plague. The arrogance of a system that thinks it owns the future. Our children are the future. They are, and they always will be. Okay? So, we kind of need to have a call to action, so to speak, because we've covered quite a bit tonight. From the Prussian roots of obedience to the Rockefeller money, the private equity buyouts of our textbooks, the psychological warfare of gender theory, and the criminalization of parenting. It can be heavy, and it is, and it's a lot. It's a lot for some people to take in. But knowing the enemy is only half the battle. And the system is betting on your exhaustion. It is. Because a lot of parents that fight this fight, they get exhausted. They get tired. They don't have the money to see it through. Okay? They are betting that you are too busy working those 40 plus hours, right? You and your significant other. That's why both parents nowadays have to work. Let's keep you out of the house. Let's keep you from parenting as much as possible, right? Because you need to pay those taxes that fund their indoctrination camps to actually fight back. Okay? So I have a couple challenges for you as active listeners out there. Check the backpack of your child when they come home. Check it. The papers that they bring home, don't just throw them away. Read them. Front, back, big print, little print. And then look at the apps that they're using, that the school is wanting your child to use. Okay? Look at it. Log in. Play around with it. See how it works. Okay? That's number 1. Number 2, show up. Go to the school board meetings. Some schools in some states, and I'm not saying all, okay? This is where critical thinking comes into play. Okay? There are some very, very good public school systems out there, okay? And they teach exactly what they're supposed to teach. They teach critical thinking. They're teaching our kids exactly what, as parents, we want them to teach, okay? But there are some schools that are not. So show up to those board meetings, because they hate it when you show up, because they're banking on you not to show up so they can keep doing the exact same things that they've been doing. Okay? And then teach the truth. As a parent, you have to be the history teacher. Teach your children about history. Talk with them about it. Take them to museums. Talk to them about the people that are path pavers of the past. Like Thomas Jefferson, Leonardo da Vinci, Nikola Tesla, right? Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, right? Be that teacher. Go out and buy some old books. The ones printed before 1980 and above. Okay? Teach them. Teach them about the heroes. Teach them about the Constitution. Teach them about all of our documents. Okay? The system wants to hijack the future, but there is one thing standing in their way, and that is you. And that is it for tonight. This is Breaking the System, and class is dismissed. See you guys next time.